The screams. Somebody make them stop. That I'm hallucinating. But there's no mistaking what I saw. And the screams, they still won't stop. It all started that day when I found a Pokemon Emerald cartridge at a pawn shop. I was ecstatic, as I didn't have Emerald yet, my first game being Pearl. I didn't wonder for an instant why it had ended up here. It was strange, considering my Fire Red didn't even save right. I should have been more careful. After getting home, I sat down to play the game. But just before the Game Freak logo faded, the game froze, and none of the buttons worked. Damn it. Suddenly, I was reminded of the Lost Silver incident, and wondered if I'd found a similar game. A shiver ran through me, and the idea to turn it off crossed my mind, but it was as if I was glued to the game. Even if I had my doubts about this, some part of me wanted to figure out what was going on. After about a minute of the frozen logo and looped notes, the title animation continued, as what I now know to be normal, but when it came to the title screen, there was no Rayquaza. Instead, there was a sprite of a screaming face, pale white, and, well, slightly disturbing. The title of the game was Pokemon Scream White. Again, I thought of turning it off, but I couldn't bring myself to turn back now. I mean, how often would I get the chance to come across one of these? I pressed start and it brought me to the classic load game, new game screen. I selected the load game option, only to find the screen went black and made several glitch-like shrieking sounds. After about a minute or two of this, I reset the game and went through the entire process again, making sure to delete the current save file. At least I knew what to expect this time. This time I selected New Game, which brought me to Professor Birch's Welcome to the World of Pokemon speech. After he was finished, I was brought to the moving truck, and the game went on as normal. But there was one part that didn't seem like it belonged in his speech. At the very end, he said, "Beware of the..." I had no clue what that was supposed to mean, but it no doubt sent a chill through my spine, especially because of the way it was seemingly cut off. Despite how unsettled I was, I continued playing the game over the course of the next few days, each time shivering as I saw the screaming face on the start scene. I kept an eye out for whatever Professor Birch wanted me to be aware of, but the game seemed to be, for the most part, normal. As I played the game, I noticed there was a man in the Pokemon Center of Sootopolis who seemed too dark to be in a Pokemon game. He wore a black cloak that covered most of his body, and a large hat which covered his face. He also had 2 red dots that I assumed were his eyes. I was immediately reminded of the professor's warning. This was the only thing out of place so far. What else could he have been talking about? And so, I naturally went up to the man and talked to him. My curiosity was piqued, and I talked to him. "You shouldn't be talking to strangers, now should you, little one?" "I wouldn't be talking to me again if I were you," he said. Then a soft, chilling laugh emanated from the speakers, and I grinned. Here came the good part, the part I was waiting for. Of course I talked to him again, and this time he said, "I thought I told you not to talk to me again. Or am I mistaken? Maybe you should reconsider my words. I wouldn't want you to end up like they did." Same chilling laugh came, but this time it seemed darker, warped. It took some effort to press the button again. I had read about cursed games, and I was afraid that this might be one of those. What impact would it have on me? There was only one way to find out. The soft click of a button seemed to resonate in my head. I didn't even realize I'd pressed it down. And when I looked down, my finger wasn't even on a button, but resting beside it. It was too late now. This time, I heard the laugh first. A cruel, maddening laugh that hurt my ears. Then, I heard him talking. That's odd. No Pokemon games have actual speech in them. All he said was an ellipses, but the speakers delivered a very different message. I warned you. Now you'll experience the wrath. Another cackle. Shame. I actually took a liking to you. But the master will enjoy this. I felt a strong impulse to turn off the game, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. This was something I was trying to do. No point turning back now. Something about his voice was causing me to freak out. It sounded like a threat, a promise for death. Then I saw my character slowly fading, along with the walls of the Pokemon Center, leaving only the man. Then he faded too, and the screen was shrouded in total blackness. After a few moments, the man and I both came into view. Only I noticed that my sprite was pulsing, slowly fading and then becoming solid again. The man said, "Follow me." And again, I heard his voice through the speakers, not through a speech bubble. My breathing was involuntarily speeding up, and all of a sudden, I felt as if I was gasping for breath. I was terrified as to what I thought would happen to me after playing this. My player followed this man, but he was walking so slowly that I wanted to scream, "Hurry up already!" Although I had no clue what he was going to do, or if he was going to do anything. However, I found myself unable to talk, unable to scream. My throat felt like sandpaper. Instead, a whisper emerged from my lips. "Get it over with." The man turned around and appeared to be looking at my player. Or was he looking at me? Those red eyes petrified me, though they had no effect before. Fine. The master wouldn't like to be kept waiting anyways. But it's so fun to scare you children. This time the laugh was a soft, impish but it hadn't lost any of its sinister properties. He remained stationary, but I was performing the escape rope animation, spinning upwards. It was as if he was teasing me, because it was only about half the speed of the normal animation. I felt hysteria closing its talons around me now. The man had just responded to me. The game had to be cursed. This couldn't be a hack, unless the creator had an uncanny way of predicting the exact moment the player would get impatient. Maybe it was just a coincidence. I felt no comfort in these excuses. My fast breathing transformed into hyperventilation. And while I wanted to close my eyes, end the nightmare, I was frozen stiff. The room I warped to had the man standing right where he had been in the last room, one tile above me. It was an endless sea of red, with darker patches that seemed to be sort of a flowing fluid. I immediately got the impression of a sea of blood. For the GBA, it's a pretty good effect. My sprite was still pulsing, seemingly even more grisly, with the dark red fading through me. The man's voice came to a whisper, although there was no on-screen indication that he was speaking. "We are here," he hissed, then led me through the wall-less room. After we walked for about 10 seconds, a black throne came into view, and seated on it was a humanoid figure, pale white in color, its face frozen in a scream. Its teeth were strangely visible, despite it being an overworld sprite, and they looked sharp. It sported a long skeletal tail, and it seemed as if it was shivering. I could even hear the bones rattle. "Master," hissed the man, his voice becoming more and more snake-like, "I've brought someone." The creature slowly rose from its throne. The rattling noise became louder and louder until I thought it was going to deafen me, or at least cause some permanent damage. It stopped just in front of the man, who stepped aside, leaving my character to face it. It made a hissing noise, louder even than the rattling, and weaved within the noise. I heard screams, and the combined sound was even worse than the suspense from before. I found myself screaming with it, although I had been unable to manage more than a whisper before. Then, the thing leapt at me, taking up the entire screen. My eyes popped. While I'm sure I wouldn't be afraid of it under normal circumstances, the suspense led me to almost faint with fright. The only thing that kept me from not doing so was the invisible thread that tethered me to the game. Then, the screen cut to black, and a black and white sprite of a boy faded onto the screen. I heard a boyish scream follow, and then he faded into blackness. He was replaced by another boy, and then a girl, both of which screamed. Their sprites, for GBA times, were surprisingly realistic, as was the sounds of their screams, and each of their faces were frozen in an image of terror. I couldn't count how many there were. There must have been at least 50 of them. Then the last one faded to blackness, and I thought it was finally all over. That it wasn't a cursed game after all. The man's response was simply a coincidence. I felt myself relax. Some sick fucker had just decided to create a game to terrify children. Then, I saw the last sprite. I recognized it immediately, but it took a second to register who it was supposed to be. The sprite was of me. Well, a sprite with the same clothes, same hair, same facial features. It was as if I was looking into some sort of pixelated mirror. I heard my scream, and screamed along with it. There's something unnerving about an echoey sort of effect on your own scream, hearing both of you scream at the same time, and I had no doubt that now, I knew that this was a cursed game. The sprite was mine, and the scream was mine. After what seemed like ages, my sprite faded too, but simply pulsed back, as May's overworld sprite had before. Eventually it faded and didn't come back, and I thought it was over. Finally, it was over. But then, I was disappointed again. The man's voice blared through the speakers, making me jump. It was even louder than it had been before. "Don't think it's all over yet, Aaron." I shivered as he said my name. My real name. Not like I usually put in there. "You'll never escape us." More cackling and screams. And then the screen turned black. The speakers made glitchy screeches, and it was over. It was finally over. But the man's laugh still echoed in my head. When my parents got home, they found me huddled in a corner, staring at the blank screen of my Game Boy Advance, screaming and spurting out random gibberish. They tried their best to comfort me and reduced it to a whimpering, but when they asked me what was wrong, all I could do was lift a shaky finger and point at the game. They scheduled an appointment with a counselor the next day, but he didn't believe a word I said. They claimed the game didn't even play, but when they tried to show me, I just started screaming again. Started crying. "No! No! Make it stop! Just make it stop!" They threw it away, but I know that it will make its way to its next victim. It'll terrorize the next person who comes across it. They all say that I'm crazy. Hell, maybe I am. Just, please, make the screaming stop.